Good evening, or perhaps good night. Wherever you are listening from, allow yourself to become comfortable now. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breathing slow, just a little. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to do, and nothing you need to remember. Tonight, we're going to drift gently through history. Not the loud kind filled with battles and speeches, but the quiet kind. The kind that moves slowly, like water in a harbor. The kind that hums softly beneath the noise of the modern world. Tonight's story is about a statue. A statue that stands very still. A statue that has watched centuries pass without saying a word. A statue that has listened to waves, foghorns, footsteps, and hopes. This is the story of the Statue of Liberty, as told softly, slowly, and peacefully, so that if sleep comes for you along the way, you are welcome to let it. Long before there was a statue standing in the water, before copper robes caught the sunlight, before tourists lined up with cameras in quiet excitement, there was only the harbor. New York Harbor, in its earliest days, was a place of calm movement. Tides flowed in and out, gently and predictably. The water reflected the sky in soft grays and pale blues. Seabirds rested on wooden pilings, lifting lazily into the air when boats passed by. The land around the harbor was uneven and green. Low hills rolled gently toward the shoreline. Tall grasses bent in the breeze. Trees stood close together, whispering quietly when the wind passed through them. Long before Europeans arrived, this land was home to the Lenape people. They knew the harbor well. They understood its rhythms. They traveled across it in canoes, gliding smoothly over the water. Fishing, trading, and gathering were part of daily life. There were no towering buildings yet, no iron bridges, no endless lines of lights. Only water, wood, wind, and time. In the center of the harbor sat a small island, not very large, not especially dramatic, just a quiet patch of land surrounded by moving water. Over the years, this island would be known by many names. To the Lenape, it was part of their natural world, not something separate or owned, but something simply there. When the Dutch arrived in the early 1600s, they began to reshape the harbor in their own way. They named the nearby settlement New Amsterdam. The island became known as Oyster Island because oysters were plentiful in the surrounding waters. The shells piled up along the shore, pale and chalky in the sun. Later, it was called Great Bedloe's Island, named after an early settler. At times, the island was quiet. At other times, it felt the heavy footsteps of soldiers and workers. But for most of its early life, it remained peaceful, surrounded by water, listening to waves lap gently against its edges. No one yet imagined that this small island would one day hold one of the most recognizable figures in the world. As years passed, the harbor grew more important. Ships arrived more frequently. Trade increased. The young United States began to think carefully about protection and defense. On the island, construction began. Stone by stone, Fort Wood was built in the early 1800s. Its shape was unusual, a star with 11 points, designed to protect the harbor from potential attack. The fort stood quietly most of the time. Soldiers stationed there followed simple routines: walking patrols, cleaning equipment, writing letters home, watching ships come and go. Life moved slowly. The water continued its endless motion around the island. Fog sometimes rolled in, wrapping the fort in soft gray silence. At night, lanterns glowed faintly against the darkness. Still, the island remained mostly unnoticed. It was useful, but not famous. That would change, though no one on the island could yet feel it coming. Thousands of miles away, across the Atlantic Ocean, a quiet idea began to form. It did not arrive suddenly. It was not shouted or announced. It grew slowly, the way thoughtful ideas often do. In France, during the mid-1800s, a man named Édouard René de Laboulaye spent his evenings thinking about liberty, democracy, and the future of nations. He admired the United States, not because it was perfect, but because it represented an ongoing experiment, an idea that people could govern themselves, that freedom was something worth working toward. Laboulaye imagined a symbol, not a weapon, not a monument to power, but something calm, something welcoming, something quietly strong. A statue. One that could stand near the entrance to New York Harbor, greeting ships, travelers, and newcomers without saying a word. A gift, perhaps, from France to America. A shared symbol of ideals rather than victories. At first, it was only a thought. Thoughts are gentle things. They drift, they wait, and sometimes, if given enough time, they grow. To bring this idea to life, Laboulaye turned to a sculptor named Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Bartholdi was a man who liked to imagine things on a large scale, but he was also patient. He did not rush. He studied forms, faces, postures, light and shadow. When he thought about the statue, he did not imagine movement or drama. He imagined stillness, a woman standing quietly, holding a torch, not in triumph, but as guidance, wearing robes that fell naturally, like fabric caught in a gentle breeze. Her expression would not be fierce, nor joyful. It would be calm, steady, enduring. Bartholdi traveled. He visited Egypt, where massive statues stood silently for centuries. He studied how scale affected emotion, how something very large could still feel gentle if shaped with care. Slowly, the vision became clearer. This statue would not rush the viewer. It would wait for them. Before anything could be built, there was planning. Letters crossed the Atlantic by ship. Ideas traveled slowly, folded into envelopes. Sketches were drawn, revised, and drawn again. Eventually, it was agreed. France would build the statue. America would build the pedestal. Together, they would share the meaning. Work began in France. In workshops filled with soft daylight, artisans shaped clay and plaster. Hammering echoed gently against metal. Copper sheets were carefully formed, each one shaped to fit a larger hole. The statue did not appear all at once. It grew gradually. An arm here, a foot there, a face emerging slowly from careful work. People who passed by the workshop sometimes stopped to look. They spoke quietly. They wondered what it would be like when finished. Outside, life continued at its usual pace. Carts rolled over cobblestones. Cafes filled with quiet conversation. The sign flowed steadily, just as it always had. Bartholdi paid special attention to the statue's face. He wanted it to feel timeless, not tied to one emotion, not locked into a single moment. Some say the face was inspired by his mother. Others believe it was meant to be more symbolic than personal. What mattered most was the feeling it gave. When you looked at her, you would not feel judged. You would not feel rushed. You would feel observed, perhaps, but gently, as if someone were standing quietly nearby, keeping watch without interference. The eyes would gaze outward, not at the city, not at the island, but toward the open sea, toward arriving ships, toward the long horizon where water meets sky. As years passed, pieces of the statue were completed. In 1876, the arm holding the torch was finished first. It was displayed in America, allowing people to see and imagine the rest. Visitors climbed up into the torch. They looked out across the harbor. They spoke in hushed tones, as if already sensing the statue's future calm presence. Back in France, the rest of the statue took shape. Slow work. Careful work. Patient work. No one rushed the process. They understood, perhaps instinctively, that something meant to stand for centuries should not be hurried. And here, this is a gentle place to pause. The statue is not yet complete. The island is still waiting. The harbor continues its endless motion. If your breathing has slowed, if your thoughts are drifting, that is exactly as it should be. In the next part, we'll quietly follow the statue's journey across the ocean, piece by piece, crate by crate, until it reaches the waiting waters of New York Harbor. For now, let your mind rest. Imagine moonlight on calm water, a distant shoreline, a promise still forming. Sleep is welcome here, though the Statue of Liberty would one day stand tall and whole. Her first great journey would be made in pieces. This may seem strange, but it was necessary. She was simply too large to cross the ocean all at once. In a quiet French port city, workers carefully disassembled the statue, not with haste, not with noise. Each copper panel was gently removed, numbered, and wrapped with care. Crates were built from sturdy wood. Inside them, the statue rested, folded into herself like a sleeping giant. Arms, robes, dotty, sections of the face. Even the torch, which had already been admired by thousands, was placed carefully into darkness. There was no ceremony when this happened, no grand farewell, just the steady work of hands, the creak of wood, and the soft understanding that something important was about to travel far from home. The ship chosen for the journey was called Isère. She was not the largest ship in the harbor, nor the fastest, but she was dependable. Isère sat calmly in the water, her hull rocking gently with the tide. One by one, the crates were loaded on board. Dock workers moved slowly and carefully. They understood the weight of what they carried, not just in pounds, but in meaning. As each crate disappeared into the ship's hold, the statue became quieter, invisible. For a time she existed only as potential, a future shape waiting to be reassembled. When the loading was complete, the ship rested low in the water, full and ready. The ropes were loosened, the engine stirred, and without fanfare, Isère began her long voyage across the Atlantic. The Atlantic Ocean is vast, but it is not always dramatic. On many days, it stretches calmly in every direction, its surface broken only by small waves and distant seabirds. As Isère traveled westward, days passed in quiet repetition. The crew followed simple routines, checking cargo, maintaining equipment, sharing meals, watching the horizon. At night, stars filled the sky. There is something deeply calming about being far from land. No buildings, no streets, no crowds, only water, wind, and time. Below deck, in the dark hold, the pieces of the statue traveled in silence. They felt the motion of the sea, a gentle rocking, like breathing. The copper cooled and warmed with the changing air. Salt drifted through the ship. The statue did not know it yet, but this would be her only journey. Once assembled, she would never move again. Not every day at sea is calm. There were moments when the wind grew stronger, when clouds gathered, when waves rose a little higher. But even storms passed. Rain tapped softly against the ship's deck. Sails tightened. The crew worked steadily, without panic. Inside her crates, the statue waited. She had all the time in the world. This patience, this ability to wait without urgency, is something the statue would later share with everyone who looked upon her. After weeks at sea, a change appeared on the horizon. Land, key. At first, it was only a darker line beneath the sky. Then, shapes became clearer. The coastline of the United States emerged quietly, as coastlines often do. Isère entered New York Harbor on June 17, 1885. Oh, the harbor looked different than it once had. More ships, more movement, more sound. But the water was still water. The tide still rose and fell. As Isère approached the city, people began to notice. Boats gathered. Whistles sounded softly across the water. Flags fluttered lazily in the breeze. The crates remained closed. The statue was still unseen, but her presence was felt. New York, in the late 1800s, was busy. Streets filled with carts and horses. Factories hummed. Voices rose and blended together. Yet, for a moment, the city paused. Newspapers wrote about the ship's arrival. People spoke about the statue in cafes and homes. There was excitement, but it was not loud excitement. It was curious excitement. What would she look like? How tall would she be? What would it feel like to stand beneath her? The crates were unloaded slowly. They were transferred to Bedloe's Island, where Fort Wood waited quietly. Once again, the statue disappeared from view. While France had kept its promise, America faced a challenge. The pedestal, the stone base that would support the statue, was not yet finished. Money was short. Fundraising was slow. Construction stopped and started, progress moving in small steps. For a time, the statue waited in pieces on the island. Seasons changed. Summer warmed the harbor. Autumn brought cool winds. Winter wrapped the island in stillness. Snow settled on the fort's walls. Ice formed at the edges of the water. The statue remained patient. While plans were debated and funds were gathered, daily life continued. Ferries crossed the harbor, carrying workers back and forth. Fishermen cast their lines in early morning light. Dock workers loaded cargo. Families lived their lives, one day at a time. Some people barely noticed the island anymore. It was just another part of the harbor. They did not yet know that soon. A quiet figure would stand there, watching them come and go, year after year. Eventually, help arrived from an unexpected place. A newspaper publisher named Joseph Pulitzer had an idea. He believed the pedestal should be funded not by the wealthy alone, but by ordinary people. Through his newspaper, the New York World, he invited readers to contribute whatever they could. A few cents, $1, a note of support. And they did. Children sent pennies. Workers sent small coins. Families gave what they could spare. No contribution was too small. Slowly, very slowly, the funds grew. Stone by stone, the pedestal rose. The pedestal was built of concrete and granite. It rose within the walls of Fort Wood, fitting neatly inside the star-shaped fort. Workers climbed scaffolding. Tools echoed softly against stone. From the harbor, the island began to look different. Taller, more purposeful. Still, everything moved at a gentle pace. No rushing, no urgency. The statue would wait as long as needed. And now, this is another quiet place to rest. The statue has arrived, but she is still not standing. She waits in pieces, patient and silent. The pedestal grows slowly beneath the sky. The harbor continues its endless rhythm. If sleep is drawing closer, you are welcome to let it. In the next part, we'll gently witness the statue being assembled, piece by piece, until she finally rises above the water. For now, imagine the soft sound of waves against stone, cool air drifting over the harbor, and time moving just slowly enough. On Bedloe's island, the crates were finally opened, one by one. Inside, the copper pieces waited, dull brown at first. Not yet the green the world would one day know so well. Workers moved with care. Each piece was lifted, examined, and placed nearby. Numbers scratched onto the copper guided the process. There was no rush. They understood that mistakes made in haste would last a long time. The statue began to emerge gradually, not as a whole figure, but as fragments forming a quiet promise. A foot resting on the ground, the edge of a robe curling outward, the curve of a hand. From a distance, it did not yet look like a woman. It looked more like a puzzle patiently solving itself. Inside the statue, something unseen was taking shape. A metal framework, designed by Gustave Eiffel, the same engineer who would later create the Eiffel Tower. This internal structure was not meant to be admired. It was meant to support, to flex slightly in the wind, to endure decades of weather. Eiffel understood something important. If the statue was to stand calmly through storms, she needed to be allowed to move just a little. Not rigid, not frozen, but responsive. The iron skeleton rose first, quietly, like bones beneath skin. The copper panels were then attached to it, not tightly, but thoughtfully, so that heat, cold, and wind would not tear her apart. This careful balance between strength and flexibility would become part of the statue's quiet character. Days on the island followed a steady rhythm. Morning light arrived softly over the harbor. Tools were unpacked. Scaffolding was climbed. Workers spoke in low voices, often pausing to look out over the water. From their vantage point, they could see ferries moving like small toys, smoke drifting from chimneys, the distant shapes of buildings. Sometimes fog rolled in. The statue would vanish into it, her form only half seen, like a dream not fully remembered. When the fog lifted, she was there again, unchanged, patient. One of the quietest moments came when the face was finally raised into place. Carefully, slowly. The copper features were fitted together. Nose, cheeks, lips, eyes. From below, the expression was difficult to read. From farther away, it seemed calmer. Not smiling, not frowning, simply present. Workers paused when the face was set. Not for applause, not for ceremony. Just a moment of stillness. It felt like someone had arrived, even though no one had moved. The statue's robes were designed to appear as if caught in a soft breeze. But they were not dramatic. They did not swirl or fly. They fell. Heavy, steady. Each fold was shaped carefully, casting soft shadows that changed throughout the day. Morning light revealed details. Afternoon light smoothed them away. At sunset, the copper glowed faintly, almost warm. At night, the statue blended into the darkness, becoming part of the island itself. From the water, people began to notice the change. Boat captains slowed their vessels. Passengers pointed gently. "She's getting taller," someone might say. "She's almost done," another would reply. But still, life continued. The harbor did not stop for the statue. It simply flowed around her. And perhaps that was fitting. The statue was not meant to interrupt life, only to stand beside it. The final major piece to be raised was the torch. It arrived slowly, lifted by ropes and pulleys. The torch was not a flame. It was not fire. It was a symbol, a quiet light held high. Originally, the torch was meant to shine with real light. Glass panels reflected the sun by day and glowed softly at night. When it was finally set into place, the statue was complete. She stood tall now, her arm raised, her gaze fixed toward the open sea. The statue stood 305 feet from the ground to the tip of the torch. But numbers don't tell the whole story. What mattered was how she felt. From close up, she was enormous. From far away, she seemed calm and still. She did not dominate the harbor. She belonged to it. The pedestal beneath her felt solid and grounded. The island seemed balanced, as if this had always been where she was meant to stand. Though the statue was assembled, she was not yet officially introduced to the world. She waited. Again. For months, she stood silently, watching ships come and go. Wind brushed past her robes. Rain streaked down her copper skin. Birds occasionally rested on her crown. She did not react. She simply remained. And here, once more, we slow our steps. The statue is standing now, whole, complete, and waiting. In the next part, we'll quietly attend the dedication day, not as a loud celebration, but as a calm moment in time. If your thoughts are fading, If sleep is drawing closer, you are exactly where you need to be. Imagine the harbor at dusk, water reflecting fading light, and a statue standing watch, without movement, without sound. The morning of October 28, 1886, did not begin with trumpets. It began the way most mornings do. The harbor stirred gently. Mist hung low over the water. Boats moved slowly, leaving soft ripples behind them. On Bedloe's island, the statue stood motionless, already familiar to the gulls and the wind. Her copper surface was still new, not yet softened into green, but already muted by weather and time. She did not know this day was special. She had no sense of calendars or ceremonies. She simply stood, as she would continue to do for generations. Across the water, New York prepared. People dressed carefully, but not extravagantly. Hats were brushed. Shoes were polished. Ferries filled with passengers heading toward the harbor. Some stood at railings. Others found quiet places to sit. There was excitement, but it was not frantic. It was the kind of excitement that hums quietly beneath conversation. In Manhattan, a parade was planned, but even the parade had a measured pace. Marching bands played, not too loudly, their music drifting between buildings. Office workers leaned from windows. Paper floated down from above, soft and unplanned, creating what would later be called the first ticker tape parade. The paper did not fall all at once. It drifted slowly, like snow. People watched it settle on streets and shoulders. No one rushed to clean it away. For a moment, the city allowed itself to pause. On the island, a small gathering formed near the pedestal. There were officials, invited guests, and those whose curiosity had drawn them close. Speeches were given, words about liberty, about friendship between nations, about hope. The most famous speech came from President Grover Cleveland, but even his words, though important, were carried away by the breeze. Not everyone heard them clearly, and that was fine. The statue did not need words to speak for her. For a time, the statue's face was covered. A veil hung over her features, softening her outline. Then, at the chosen moment, the covering was released. It did not fall dramatically. It slipped away. The statue's face was revealed, calm, unchanged, unmoved by applause. Cheers rose briefly. Boats sounded their horns. Cannons fired salutes across the water. But these sounds did not last long. Soon, the harbor returned to its usual rhythm. As evening approached, fireworks were prepared. When they lit the sky, their reflections danced on the harbor's surface. Colors bloomed, then faded. Smoke drifted upward, thin and pale. The statue stood through it all. She did not sparkle. She did not move. She simply remained. When the day ended, people went home. Ferries returned to their roots. Music faded. Night settled over the harbor. The statue was left alone again. Moonlight touched her crown. Stars reflected faintly in the water below. This quiet after the event was her natural state. Not celebration, not attention, stillness. That first night after dedication, the statue stood exactly as she would the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. The meaning others placed upon her did not change her. She did not grow heavier with symbolism. She did not feel responsibility. She simply watched. Ships passed. Lights moved across the water. Wind brushed past her torch. Time resumed its gentle pace. And here, we pause again. The statue has been introduced to the world, but her real life has only just begun. In the next part, we'll drift into her daily existence, how she quietly became part of the harbor's routine, watching over arrivals, departures, and ordinary lives. If sleep is close now, let it come. Picture the harbor at night. Dark water, soft reflections, and a single figure standing, patient and unchanging. In the days after the dedication, something subtle happened. The statue stopped being new. At first, people had traveled specifically to see her. They spoke about her. They pointed. But slowly, she became part of the background of everyday life. Ferries passed her without slowing. Sailors glanced up briefly, then returned to their work. Dock workers noticed the weather more than the statue, and this was exactly how it was meant to be. She was not there to interrupt the flow of life. She was there to stand beside it. From her place on Bedloe's island, the statue watched the harbor from dawn until night. Mornings began with pale light over the water. Mist sometimes wrapped around her pedestal, leaving only her upper half visible, as if she were floating. By midday, the harbor grew busy. Steamships moved steadily. Smaller boats darted between them. Smoke rose and drifted away. The statue did not follow any single vessel. She watched them all equally. The statue quickly learned the language of weather. Rain tapped softly against her copper skin. Wind pressed gently against her raised arm. Snow settled into the folds of her robe. Each season left its mark. In summer, the sun warmed her surface. In autumn, cooler air sharpened the sky. In winter, ice formed at the edges of the island. Still, she did not change her posture. She did not lean into the wind. She did not bow beneath the snow. She endured, not with force, but with patience. Over time, something subtle began to happen. The copper surface of the statue started to change color. At first, it was barely noticeable. Small patches, slight dulling. Then, slowly, the copper reacted with air and moisture. A green patina began to form. This was not decay. It was protection. The surface sealed itself, creating a layer that would preserve the metal beneath. Some people worried. They thought the statue was rusting. They feared damage, but engineers reassured them. This change was natural, expected, a quiet transformation meant to last. Though the statue was the island's most visible presence, she was not alone. Caretakers lived and worked nearby. They maintained the grounds. They monitored the structure. Their days were simple: checking pathways, cleaning areas open to visitors, watching the weather. At night, lanterns glowed softly. The island felt calm, separate from the busy city just beyond the water. For a short time, the statue served as a lighthouse. The torch was illuminated, meant to guide ships safely into the harbor. But the light was not strong enough. Fog often dimmed it. Distance weakened it. Eventually, the role was retired. Still, the idea remained. The statue did not need to function as a lighthouse, to feel like one. Her presence alone was enough. Day after day, ships entered the harbor. Some carried goods, some carried people. They arrived quietly, without fanfare. Passengers often gathered on deck as land came into view. Some noticed the statue right away. Others saw her only after someone pointed. Reactions were varied. A quiet nod, a pause, a soft word spoken under breath. The statue did not respond. She simply stood. At night, the harbor changed. Lights reflected on the water. Sounds softened. The city glowed faintly in the distance. From her island, the statue watched darkness move in layers. Sometimes fog returned, wrapping her in silence. Sometimes stars appeared. She remained visible, or invisible, depending on the hour. It made no difference to her. Weeks turned into months, months into years. The statue watched fashions change. Ship designs evolve. The skyline shifts slowly. She was never in a hurry to understand. She observed, and allowed time to do what it does best. Move forward. And here, we pause again. The statue has settled into her role, not as an event, but as a constant. In the next part, we'll begin to notice the people she quietly watches most closely, those arriving from distant lands, bringing hopes folded carefully into their journeys. For now, let your thoughts rest like boats at anchor. Picture calm water, dim lights, and a figure standing watch, not expecting anything, not asking anything. As the years passed, the harbor grew busier. Steamships crossed the Atlantic regularly now, moving in steady rhythms between continents. These ships carried many things: mail, cargo, letters, news to woes. But most quietly of all, they carried people, families, individuals, small groups sitting close together on deck. They leaned against railings. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the horizon for signs of land. The journey had been long. Days blurred together. The ocean offered little variety. Then, one morning, someone would point, and there she was. For many passengers, the Statue of Liberty was the first thing they saw of America. Not the city, not the streets, not the noise, just a figure standing still in the water. Some saw her through mist, some through rain, some beneath clear skies. The statue did not announce their arrival. She did not wave. She simply stood there, unmoving, watching the ship approach. For those on board, that was enough. The reactions were often quiet. A hand gripping the railing a little tighter. A breath released slowly. A whisper in a language not yet spoken on land. Some people smiled. Some cried softly. Some simply stared. The statue did not know their stories. She did not know where they came from, or what they hoped to find. She did not need to. Her role was not to understand, only to be present. Many passengers arrived with little more than a suitcase. Inside were a few clothes, a photograph, perhaps a small object from home. But inside their minds were heavier things, memories, fears, home, expectations. As the ship passed the statue, Those thoughts moved quietly from one place to another. Old lives drifting behind them. New lives not yet formed. The statue watched it all without comment. Just beyond the statue lay Ellis Island. A place of waiting. A place of questions, examinations, and forms. For many immigrants, this was where their journey truly paused. The statue stood nearby, close enough to be seen, but far enough to remain unreachable. From Ellis Island's halls and windows, people could glimpse her across the water. She did not come closer. She remained where she was. Over time, people began to connect the statue with these arrivals, not through speeches or instructions, but through repetition. Ship after ship, face after face. The statue became part of the experience of arrival. Not a promise, not a guarantee, but a moment, a pause between what had been and what might be. Officially, her name was Liberty Enlightening the World, but most people simply called her the Statue of Liberty. She did not mind the shortening. She did not mind being reinterpreted. Meaning, like water, tends to change shape over time. The statue accepted this quietly. For many newcomers, language was a challenge. English was unfamiliar. Signs were confusing. But the statue did not speak any language. She stood in silence. And in that silence, everyone understood her the same way. As a marker, as a presence, as something solid and steady in the middle of uncertainty. Not every ship carried hopeful newcomers. Some carried returning travelers. Some carried goods. Some passed without anyone looking up. The statue did not react differently. She treated each arrival the same. That consistency became part of her character. From her island, the statue watched people arrive, wait, leave, and settle. Some stayed in the city. Some traveled onward. Some returned home years later. She did not follow their paths. She remained where she was. That too was part of her gift. And now, we slow again. The harbor is quiet in this moment. A ship moves steadily forward. People stand at the railings, their thoughts heavy, but hopeful. The statue watches, not closely, not distantly, just steadily. If sleep is near, let it arrive without effort. In the next part, we'll drift into the early 20th century. As the city grows, the world changes, and the statue continues to stand, unchanged in posture, but deepening in meaning. For now, imagine the soft hum of engines, the slow movement of water, and a calm figure standing between past and future. As the 1800s gave way to the early 1900s, New York continued to grow. Buildings climbed higher. Streets grew busier. Sounds layered upon sounds. From her island, the statue watched it all happen gradually. She did not feel crowded. The water around her kept its space. The harbor remained her buffer, a moving border between stillness and motion. In the early years of the new century, changes arrived quietly. Electric lights began to appear along the shoreline. They replaced gas lamps, casting a steadier glow. At night, the city shimmered differently. The statue saw these lights reflect across the water, stretching and breaking with each wave. She did not glow brightly yet herself. She simply observed. More people began to visit the island. They arrived by ferry. stepping onto the dock with curiosity and calm. They walked the grounds. They looked up, always up. Climbing the pedestal was an effort, but many did it slowly, resting along the way. Inside the statue, narrow staircases curved upward. Steps echoed softly. Voices hushed naturally. From the crown, visitors looked out through small windows. The harbor spread wide below them. They did not stay long. The space encouraged quiet rather than conversation. As years passed, the statue's green color deepened. The change was slow and even. She no longer looked new, and that was all right. The patina softened her appearance, making her feel older, more settled, like a tree that has stood long enough to blend into the landscape. Though she did not move, the statue existed in a world that did. Wars came and went elsewhere. Borders shifted far away. News traveled across the ocean. Sometimes, the harbor felt heavier, ships arriving with fewer passengers, or with different kinds of cargo. Other times, it felt hopeful again. The statue did not mark these changes loudly. She simply remained present through them. When the First World War began, the harbor did not fall silent, but there was a shift. Ships moved with more purpose. Some carried supplies. Some carried soldiers. The statue watched these vessels depart, their decks crowded. She did not wave goodbye. She did not know who would return. She stood, as she always had. After the war, life resumed its familiar rhythm. The city expanded upward. New buildings rose, casting longer shadows. The harbor remained open and wide. The statue continued her daily routine. Sunrise, movement, sunset dawdy. At night, the island felt especially calm. The city glowed across the water. But the island remained quieter. Caretakers walked their rounds. Lights flickered softly. The statue stood above it all, her silhouette clear against the sky. Sometimes fog returned, blurring edges and softening outlines. In those moments, the statue felt less like an object and more like an idea. Children who had arrived long ago grew into adults. Some returned to the harbor years later. They pointed the statue out to their own children. They told stories. Not always accurate ones, but meaningful ones. The statue listened without correcting. And here, we pause again. Time has moved forward, but the statue remains the same. In the next part, we'll drift into a quieter but heavier time as the world faces uncertainty again, and the statue continues her watch. For now, let your thoughts slow. Picture the harbor under a dim sky. Lights shimmering, water moving steadily, and a figure standing, unbothered by change, unmoved by urgency. As the 1930s arrived, the rhythm of the harbor shifted again. The Great Depression touched nearly every corner of the country. Ships still moved, but there were fewer of them. Cargo holds were not always full. Docks felt quieter. From her island, the statue watched men and women arrive each morning, searching for work, moving with tired determination. She did not change her posture. She did not offer answers. She stood. New York continued to function, but more slowly. Construction paused on some projects. Lights dimmed earlier at night. The harbor reflected this quieter mood. Ferries ran, But conversations were softer. The statue remained visible, a constant shape amid uncertainty. For some, the statue became a comfort, simply because she did not change. She did not promise improvement. She did not predict the future. She was simply there. Sometimes that was enough. People walking along the waterfront would glance out at her, briefly, then continue on their way. Despite difficult times, visitors still came. They arrived by ferry, walked slowly around the island, and looked up. They did not stay long, but the visit itself offered a quiet pause, a moment removed from worry. Inside the statue, the staircases echoed gently. The view from the crown remained wide and open. The harbor still stretched toward the horizon. Eventually, the world shifted again. Another war arrived. This time, it was larger. Ships crowded the harbor. Some carried supplies. Some carried soldiers. Some departed under cover of early morning light. The statue watched them leave. She did not know their destinations. She did not know their outcomes. She stood, as she always had, during the war. Lights around the harbor were sometimes dimmed. Blackouts reduced visibility. At night, the statue blended more easily into the darkness. Her torch was not a beacon in those years. She became more silhouette than symbol. Still, she was there. The statue did not represent action. She did not represent strength in motion. She represented endurance, standing still, when movement was everywhere, remaining visible, when certainty was not. This quiet presence took on new meaning. When the war ended, the harbor filled with sound again. Ships returned. Lights brightened. People gathered along the waterfront. Celebration arrived, but even celebration faded. The statue remained. After the war, life resumed its familiar rhythm. New buildings rose. The city expanded outward. Immigration patterns shifted. Some arrivals slowed. Others increased. The statue watched each change with the same calm gaze. Years passed. The statue aged gently. Maintenance crews came and went. Repairs were made quietly. Nothing dramatic. Just care. And now, we pause again. The world has moved through hardship and recovery, and the statue has remained. In the next part, we'll drift into the mid-20th century. As tourism grows, the statue's meaning shifts again, and her quiet watch continues. For now, let your breathing slow. Imagine dark water beneath a calm sky, faint city lights, and a figure standing, unshaken, unchanged. By the 1950s, the Statue of Liberty had become part of the city's identity. She appeared in photographs, in postcards, in memories shared across dinner tables. But on the island itself, nothing changed quickly. The ferry continued its steady route. Visitors stepped onto the dock, looked up, and fell quiet. Some had seen her many times before, others only once. The statue treated them all the same. As travel became easier, more people arrived just to see the statue. Families, school groups, visitors from far away. They walked slowly, listened to guides speak softly, and climbed the stairs at their own pace. Inside the statue, the air felt cool and still. Footsteps echoed gently. The view from above remained wide and calming. The skyline behind the statue changed. New buildings rose, taller than before. Glass and steel joined stone. From her island, the statue watched the city stretch upward. She did not compete with it. She stood apart. The water between them kept her grounded, rooted in her original place. As decades passed, maintenance became part of the statue's routine. Metal was checked. Stairs were reinforced. Safety improved. These changes happened quietly. There were no announcements, no grand reopening, just care, applied slowly and thoughtfully. For many people, the statue became something remembered, as much as something seen. She appeared in stories, in lessons at school, in quiet thoughts about arrival and belonging. Each person carried a slightly different version of her. The statue did not correct them, though she stood silently. People spoke to her in their own way. Some whispered hopes. Some took photographs. Some simply sat nearby. The statue offered no response. But she listened, or at least, it felt that way. Through all of this, the harbor remained active. Ships came and went. Ferries crossed. Water moved. The statue was not the center of it all. She was part of it. A steady note in a long, ongoing rhythm. Children who once climbed her stairs returned years later with children of their own. The steps felt narrower, the climb slower. The view from the crown, however, felt the same. Wide, open-eyed, enduring. And here, we rest again. The statue has become familiar, almost expected, yet still quietly meaningful. In the next part, we'll drift toward the late 20th century as the statue faces restoration, renewed attention, and the weight of being remembered. For now, let the harbor settle. Picture soft water, slow ferries, and a figure standing, unchanged, unhurried. By the late 1970s, the Statue of Liberty had been standing for nearly a century. Wind had pressed against her for decades. Rain had traced the same paths down her robes. Over and over again, salt from the harbor lingered in the air. Sunrise and sunset had repeated themselves thousands of times, though she remained strong. Time had left quiet marks. Inside, iron supports showed wear. Some materials were no longer ideal. Technology had moved forward. The statue did not ask for attention, but attention arrived anyway. As the centennial approached, the 100th anniversary of her dedication, plans began to form. Not dramatic plans, not rushed ones, careful ones. Engineers, historians, and caretakers walked the island. They climbed inside the statue. They examined details few visitors ever saw. They spoke quietly. They took notes. The goal was simple: to help the statue continue standing for another century and another. For a time, the statue was closed to visitors. Ferries still passed. People still looked from a distance. But the island felt different. Scaffolding rose around her, softening her outline. From afar, she looked wrapped, protected rather than hidden. The statue accepted this calmly. She had never needed to be seen every day, to exist. Inside the statue, work progressed slowly. Old iron was replaced. New materials were chosen carefully. Nothing was rushed. Each decision was weighed against time. The copper skin was cleaned gently. The torch was replaced. A careful replica created to better withstand the elements. The original torch was preserved, not discarded. It rested indoors, safe and quiet. From the water, boats continued their steady paths. Some passengers wondered when the statue would reopen. Others barely noticed the scaffolding. Life moved on. The statue remained where she had always been, just temporarily surrounded by care. When the work was complete, the scaffolding came down, slowly, piece by piece. The statue emerged again, familiar, yet renewed. There was no need for a grand announcement. People noticed. They always did. In 1986, the statue reached her 100th year. There were celebrations. Fireworks returned to the harbor, but beyond the noise, the statue herself remained unchanged. She stood as she always had. She did not age suddenly. She did not grow wiser overnight. She simply continued. As the world changed rapidly around her, people looked to the statue again. Some found reassurance in her constancy. Others saw a reflection of ideals revisited, reconsidered. The statue did not insist on any meaning. She allowed each generation to see her differently. And here, we pause once more. The statue has been renewed, not transformed. In the next part, we'll drift gently into the modern era, where technology changes how people see her, but not how she stands. For now, let your thoughts settle like water after a ferry passes. Picture the harbor at night, quiet lights, and a figure standing, cared for, unchanged in purpose. Today, the Statue of Liberty is seen in many ways. In photographs shared instantly, in videos captured from the air, in images viewed on glowing screens. Yet, on her island, very little feels hurried. The ferry still crosses the harbor at a measured pace. Visitors still step onto the dock and look up. The statue still stands, exactly where she always has. People arrive now from every corner of the world. They carry phones and cameras. They speak many languages, but when they look up, their reactions remain familiar. A pause, a breath, a moment of stillness. The statue does not compete with their devices. She simply exists. Inside the statue, the stairs still curve upward. They feel narrow. They feel quiet. The climb requires patience. At the top, the view remains unchanged in spirit. Water in every direction. The city beyond. Movement without rush. People do not linger long. The space encourages calm. The island has changed gently. Paths are well kept. Signs are clear. There are places to sit and rest. The island feels intentional, designed to slow people down. Even brief visits feel separate from the city beyond the water. The world beyond the harbor moves quickly. News arrives instantly. Voices are louder. Time feels compressed. The statue does not respond to this pace. She does not accelerate. She remains a reminder that not everything must move quickly to matter. Rain still traces familiar paths down her copper surface. Wind still presses against her robes. Snow still settles in winter. The green patina remains, unchanged in tone. Time continues to pass, but gently. The statue is photographed endlessly, from every angle, at every hour. But she does not pose. She does not adjust. She does not try to look different. She stands. Without speaking, the statue teaches something simple. That presence matters. That stillness has value. That endurance can be calm. People leave the island, carrying these ideas, without realizing it. And now, we approach the end of our long, gentle journey. In the final part, we will not introduce anything new. We will simply let the story soften and fade the way evening fades into night. For now, let your breathing slow even further. Picture the harbor at dusk, lights appearing one by one, and a figure standing, just as she has always stood, watching time pass without needing to follow it. The Statue of Liberty does not wake up each morning, expecting anything. She does not wait for visitors. She does not count ships. She stands. Some days, thousands of people look up at her. Other days, fog hides her almost completely. Neither changes her. The harbor continues its quiet breathing. Water rises and falls. Currents shift. Ferries move back and forth, their engines humming softly. The statue watches without following. She has learned the shape of time here. Slow, repeating, dependable. The torch she holds is not a command. It does not flash. It does not demand attention. It is simply raised. Steady presence against sky and cloud. At night, it glows gently. By day, it catches the light and gives it back. It does not chase darkness away. It waits. Over the years, people have given the statue many meanings. Hope, welcome, freedom, memory. The statue does not hold on to any one of them. She allows meaning to come and go, the way waves do. What remains is her presence, unchanged, unbothered. In a world that often feels hurried, the statue offers something rare. Stillness. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels full enough to rest within. She reminds us, without words, that standing quietly can be enough. As night settles over the harbor, lights appear slowly. The city glows at a distance. The island grows quiet. Wind moves past the statue, brushing her robes without sound. She remains awake, but not alert. Present, but not watching closely. Long after this story ends, the statue will still be there. After tonight, after tomorrow, standing through seasons, through years, through changes she does not need to understand. She will continue, whether remembered or not. And now, there is nothing more to say. The harbor is calm. The night is steady. The statue stands quietly in the dark. Her torch, a small, patient light. If sleep has already come, let it deepen. If you are still listening, let your thoughts slow even further. Only rest. Sleep gently.